Fury as Yellowstone's tourist filmed walking dangerously close to scalding waters of world-famous Grand Prismatic Spring. Two tourists have sparked widespread outrage after they were filmed walking perilously close to the boiling waters of Yellowstone National Park's iconic Grand Prismatic Spring, ignoring safety rules and risking both their lives and one of park's most fragile natural wonders. Now it's time to break down every angle of this story on our AI
I
podcast.
want you to imagine, just for a second, that you are standing at the edge of something that is just breathtakingly beautiful,
Oh, absolutely. Just stunning.
right? You're out in the middle of this vast, completely untamed wilderness, and the colors radiating from the ground in front of you are so vivid. They almost look artificial.
Yeah, like you're looking at a painting or something.
Exactly. You've got these massive concentric rings of bright blue, green, yellow, orange, red, just stretching across the landscape. It is entirely mesmerizing.
It really is.
But as you look down at your feet, you realize there's only this simple, super narrow wooden boardwalk separating your shoes from the earth.
Yeah.
And you have to wonder, why is this flimsy wooden structure the only thing keeping you alive right now?
Well, that boardwalk is literally the physical boundary line. It's the line between the safety of human engineering and a completely inhospitable, basically alien environment. It is the only buffer.
Okay, let's unpack this, because today in this deep dive, we are looking at a recent incident at Yellowstone National Park that, it perfectly captures the modern collision between casual human behavior and the absolute lethal extremes of nature.
Yeah, it's a terrifying collision, honestly.
It really is. We are diving into a news report about two tourists who decided to just blatantly ignore those strict safety rules at the iconic Grand Prismatic Spring.
Right.
And this isn't just about someone hopping a velvet rope at a museum to get a closer look at a painting. We are talking about people strolling out onto a fiercely fragile ecosystem that is sitting directly on top of a massive geothermal hazard.
A hazard that is very much active.
Exactly. Park officials have literally warned that this specific environment can turn a human being into, and I quote, thermal soup.
Yeah, thermal suit. It's a gruesome image, but to understand how someone could willingly walk into an environment carrying a warning like that, we have to look at how the event actually unfolded.
Right.
Because the landscape plays tricks on the human mind, you know?
It totally does.
Yeah.
So the scene happens on a Sunday, right around 7 p.m. local time.
Okay.
The sun is getting low, creating that perfect, golden hour lighting across the Grand Prismatic Spring. And Tanya Sarasig, a visitor from Livingston, Montana, is standing on the overlook.
Right. She's just taking in the view.
Yeah, she's taking in the view. And while she's doing that, she notices two unidentified women who have completely left the designated pathways.
And we're not talking about just stepping one foot off the trail, right?
No, they aren't just slightly off the trail. They are walking directly across the colorful microbial mats that surround this massive steaming hot spring.
They are out on the open crust, surrounded by vapor and boiling water. It's wild.
It's insane. And Tanya's quote in the report, it really captures the sheer absurdity of the moment. She said, I remember thinking, is that really people? That can't be people. Nobody's that reckless.
But they were.
They were. These two women were just casually strolling on these delicate mats. They kept stopping, posing, taking photographs, snapping selfies.
Completely unconcerned.
Completely unconcerned. It is the equivalent of someone walking blindly through an active minefield, utterly oblivious to the explosives under their boots, just to get, the perfect lighting for their social media feed.
Yeah, walking through a minefield where the mines are disguised as a vibrant, welcoming carpet. And, if you analyze Tanya Sauersig's account, you can actually trace a very distinct psychological progression that bystanders experience in these situations.
Oh, really? Like what?
Well, she starts in pure disbelief. Her brain essentially rejects the visual information because it severely violates basic survival logic.
Right, because it just doesn't make sense.
Exactly. When you see someone doing something that should inherently trigger a massive stress response and they look completely relaxed, the observer experiences serious cognitive dissonance.
Your brain just throws an error code.
Yeah, pretty much. And then that disbelief transitions rapidly into intense fear. Tanya stated she genuinely believed they were going to fall in.
I would too.
Right. She was terrified that the dozens of people standing on the overlook were about to become involuntary witnesses to a horrific, fatal accident.
Oh man, just thinking about that.
But as the women continued to walk around completely unharmed, clicking away on their smartphones, that fear morphed into profound anger.
Well, yeah, because they were trampling something deeply ancient and fragile for a temporary digital image.
Yeah.
I mean, think about the last time you were at a national park or a major tourist landmark. You probably had your phone out.
Oh, sure. Everyone does.
Right, and it is so easy to fall into this kind of theme park mindset, where you subconsciously assume that if you are allowed to be there, the danger must be simulated or heavily mitigated by invisible safety nets.
Yeah, like you're on a ride at Disney.
Exactly. The camera screen itself acts as this psychological barrier, distancing you from the physical reality of where you are actually standing.
What's fascinating here is how the visual beauty of the park actively works against our evolutionary survival instincts, completely amplifying that theme park mindset.
How so?
Well, human beings are hardwired to associate bright, vibrant colors and serene landscapes with safety, vitality, or at least a welcoming environment.
Okay, that makes sense.
Like a barren, jagged, smoking crater, that communicates danger.
Right, you'd run away from that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But the aesthetic magnificence of the Grand Prismatic Spring completely masks an immediate and lethal threat. The beauty is the bait.
The beauty is the bait. Wow. And that visual beauty, those vibrant rainbow colors drawing tourists out onto the landscape, that is exactly what makes the area so treacherous. We really need to dive into the science of what was actually beneath their feet while they were, pausing to find their best ankles.
We do, because the reality is terrifying.
The scale alone is staggering. The Grand Prismatic Spring is the third largest hot spring in the entire world. It stretches roughly 370 feet across.
Massive.
And it doesn't just spread outward, it plunges to depths of about 160 feet.
Yeah, I mean, imagine a 15-story building filled with highly pressurized, mineral-rich water. The center of the spring reaches temperatures of approximately 188 degrees Fahrenheit. That's about 87 degrees Celsius.
Just boiling. But, if I'm playing devil's advocate here, I have to push back on the idea that the danger of the surrounding ground is visually obvious.
Okay, sure.
Because the report points out that these famous rings of blue, green, yellow, orange, and red, they rest on extremely hot water, but they are separated only by a very thin crust of earth.
Right.
So if it looks like solid dirt to the naked eye, and these vibrant microbes make it look like a thick, colorful rug, how is a layperson supposed to intuitively know it's a geological trap?
That's a fair point.
Right. Without roaring flames or crumbling rocks, the mechanism of the danger is completely hidden.
It is hidden. To the untrained eye, it does look like a solid field of brightly colored dirt. But that quote-unquote dirt is actually a geological feature called sinter, or geyserite.
Geyserite.
Yeah. It is a precarious, overhanging shelf. So as the near-boiling water from the spring bubbles up, it carries dissolved silica from deep underground.
Okay.
When that water washes over the edges and begins to cool, the silica precipitates out, literally molecule by molecule, slowly building up this crust over hundreds or thousands of years.
Wow.
It is essentially a fragile glass floor painted with biological material. It is entirely unpredictable.
Well, it's not dirt at all.
Not at all. One section might easily hold the weight of a bird, but it could fracture instantly under the concentrated weight of a human heel.
So stepping off that boardwalk triggers what is essentially a double disaster. First, you have the imminent physical danger to the tourist. Like you said, if that brittle silica crust gives way, you aren't falling into a mud puddle. You're plunging into a vat of near-washing geothermal runoff.
Right, which is instantly life-threatening.
Yeah. But secondly, even if you don't fall through, your footsteps are a permanent destruction event for the park. The vivid colors creating that carpet effect are heat-loving microorganisms. They're extremophiles that have adapted to live in these scalding waters.
And this is where we see the concept of zonation at work.
Okay, what is zonation?
Well, the center of the spring is so incredibly hot that it is mostly sterile, which is why the water appears that deep, clear blue. That's just the water scattering sunlight.
Okay.
But as the water flows outward across that silica shelf, it cools down in very specific temperature gradients. Different species of bacteria thrive at exact temperature thresholds.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Because, we are talking about tiny, ancient microbes surviving in near-boiling, mineral-dense water.
Yeah.
Normally, extreme heat breaks down the hydrogen bonds in proteins.
Right, it destroys them.
Exactly. It's the same mechanism as frying an egg. The heat denatures the proteins and they clump together. But these extremophiles have evolved uniquely structured enzymes with tighter chemical bonds that literally refuse to unfold in the heat.
Which is just an incredible biological adaptation.
It's mind-blowing. And those vibrant colors, those are actually protective pigments. As the bacteria move further out from the center, they form massive colonies. The yellow, orange, and red colors are actually carotenoids. They act as a sort of biological sunscreen to protect the microbes from the intense, high-altitude ultraviolet radiation of the sun.
Yeah, they are microscopic biological marvels that have taken centuries to develop their specific balance and zonation, creating that iconic rainbow appearance.
Right.
Yet for all their resilience against boiling water and intense solar radiation, they are incredibly fragile structurally.
Because they're just tiny microbes.
Exactly. A single human boot print crushes those intricate microbial mats instantly. According to the park's data, once those formations are damaged by footprints, they can take years or even decades to recover.
Decades, just from one step.
Yes. Some sections may never fully return to their original state because the microscopic flow of water has been permanently altered by the depression of the footprint. Yeah, so a 10-minute stroll for a photograph destroys hundreds of years of undisturbed microscopic evolution.
That is just so sad. But, knowing how physically fragile this ground is and knowing how lethal the water beneath it is, the natural question becomes, well, why isn't anyone stopping these people?
Right, where are the rangers?
Exactly. Where's the park staff?
Yeah.
This shifts our focus to the practical, logistical realities of enforcing rules in a sprawling wilderness area. Because Tanya Saueressig, she desperately wanted to report this incident while it was happening.
Well, of course she did.
She recognized the immense danger, but she was completely isolated. She couldn't find a ranger anywhere nearby, and she had zero cell phone reception to call 911 or a park hotline.
She was off the grid by design, which is why she resorted to filming the women, hoping the footage could be used later for accountability.
Yeah. And, if you've ever felt that mild panic of losing your cell signal on a road trip, you have to amplify that by 1,000,000.
Oh, absolutely.
You were surrounded by boiling acid and fragile glass earth, watching someone actively invite disaster, and you have absolutely no way to summon help. It's a profoundly helpless feeling.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture, the lack of cell service and the absence of an immediate ranger presence, well, it highlights the inherent paradox of the national park system itself.
What do you mean by paradox?
Well, under the original legislation that created these spaces, the core mandate of the National Park Service is dual, and it's conflicting.
Okay.
They have to preserve the untamed wilderness unimpaired for future generations, while simultaneously providing for public enjoyment and access.
Right. And you cannot have a pristine, untouched wilderness experience if you install 5G cell towers next to every hot spring and station an armed federal agent every 50 feet.
No, you can't.
The park covers over 2 million acres. It is larger than the states of Rhode Island and Delaware combined. Physical enforcement across that much terrain is mathematically impossible.
It is. You are entering a genuinely wild environment, and the park relies heavily on visitors operating with a basic level of common sense and respect.
Which clearly doesn't always happen.
Right. But when that fails, the judicial system steps in with heavy hands. Walking off Yellowstone's boardwalks and designated trails violates strict federal regulations.
This isn't just a slap on the wrist.
Not at all. We are talking substantial fines, federal criminal charges, and actual jail time for trespassing on a microbial mat.
Yeah, the report mentions a specific precedent for this exact behavior from earlier this year. A 50-year-old man from Frisco, Texas, named Eric Bedient, he left the designated boardwalks and walked across sensitive hydrothermal formations in the Mammoth Hot Springs area.
Right, I remember that case.
He was caught and subsequently sentenced to 5 days in jail. That is 5 days in a federal holding facility simply for taking a walk in the wrong place.
The courts take these violations incredibly seriously because the margins for error are non-existent. At the time of that sentencing, U.S. Attorney Darren Smith issued a really stark warning. He described Yellowstone's geothermal areas as among the most dangerous natural features in the world.
Wow.
He stressed that strict punitive enforcement is absolutely necessary to discourage behavior that could prove fatal not just to the tourist, but to any first responders who might be called in to attempt a rescue.
And Darren Smith didn't mince words. He warned that violators risk becoming thermal soup.
There's that phrase again.
Yeah, thermal soup. That is a brutally effective, visceral image. It is graphic and shocking, which honestly makes me wonder about the psychology of risk communication.
How do you mean?
Well, currently, the parks use standard, polite warning signs. Please stay on the boardwalk for your safety and the preservation of the park. But given how often people ignore these, do the parks need to abandon polite signage and rely entirely on terrifying, graphic language.
It's a tough call.
Like, if a sign explicitly read, "Step off this path and the crust will break," plunging you into boiling water where you will become thermal soup, would these two tourists still have walked out there for selfies?
It is a massive debate among behavioral psychologists and risk management experts right now. Do you educate and appeal to a visitor's sense of conservation, or do you shock them into compliance?
Right.
The challenge is that graphic language can sometimes backfire. It can inadvertently attract thrill seekers who view the extreme warning as a challenge rather than a boundary.
Oh, I hadn't thought of that.
Yeah. Furthermore, because the landscape looks so serene, visitors experience that cognitive dissonance we talked about. They read boiling death, but they see a beautiful, misty photo opportunity.
Right. They convince themselves the signs are exaggerations meant for children or clumsy people, not for them.
Exactly.
But the harsh rhetoric from park officials is not bureaucratic posturing or exaggeration. It is written in a long, tragic history of actual casualties. The terrain really is that unforgiving.
It really is.
The data in this report is incredibly sobering. According to the National Park Service, over 20 people have died from fatal burns after falling into or entering Yellowstone's hot springs.
20 people.
20 people. These are documented tragedies of individuals being boiled alive because they misjudged the landscape, tried to rescue a pet, or simply took a wrong step in the dark.
Those numbers represent a catastrophic failure to understand that nature does not discriminate.
No, it doesn't.
This isn't an environment that only punishes distracted tourists looking at their screens. The geothermal features are a hazard to absolutely everything that breathes. The crust does not care about your intentions, your agility, or your origin.
Wow.
To illustrate just how inherently dangerous the terrain is, the report notes a heartbreaking incident from last June involving the local wildlife.
Yeah, visitors actually watched a massive bison accidentally wander into a deep section of the Grand Prismatic Spring.
It broke through the edge, couldn't get traction on the sheer, fragile silica walls to escape, and ultimately succumbed to the scalding water.
Yeah.
So what does this all mean? We're talking about a 2-ton animal that is native to this exact landscape, a species that evolved specifically to survive the brutal winters and rugged terrain of the North American wilderness.
Right. An incredibly tough animal.
And its evolutionary adaptations, like its immense bulk, its thick hide, they were completely useless against a geothermal feature. If a massive native animal with powerful survival instincts can fall victim to the deceptive crust of the spring, it proves this isn't just a foolish tourist trap.
No, not at all.
It is an alien environment on Earth where normal biological instincts completely fail.
It means we require a fundamental shift in how we view our relationship with these spaces. We have grown very accustomed to curated, safety-proofed experiences in our daily lives.
Oh, totally. We expect guardrails everywhere.
But a national park is raw geology and chemistry in motion.
It really is. So the next time you visit a national park, or even as you scroll through stunning travel photos online, I want you to remember that those boardwalks serve a dual, highly critical purpose.
They're not just aesthetic.
No, they are not just there to keep your hiking boots out of the mud. They are the only thing protecting you from a sudden boiling death, and they are the only thing protecting an ancient, vibrant, microscopic world from your carelessness.
Well said.
They represent a fragile treaty between our desire to witness natural beauty and nature's capacity to destroy us. The wilderness owes us absolutely no safety.
And, this raises an important question regarding the future of that treaty. As smartphone cameras get more advanced and the societal pressure to capture and broadcast the perfect up-close image of untouched nature continues to escalate, we are seeing that our very curiosity is the mechanism destroying the landscape.
Yeah, that's a really dark irony.
It is. If the public consistently proves they cannot be trusted to stay on the path, will society eventually be forced to ban physical human access to these landmarks entirely, just to save them from our own narcissism?
That is a heavy thought to carry. The next time you find yourself standing on that simple wooden boardwalk, looking out over those vivid, unearthly colors, take a moment to really appreciate the view from exactly where you are standing. Because if we keep pushing the boundaries, one day that boardwalk might not be there for us to stand on at all.
Okay, one question for you. Do you think tourists who ignore safety rules in national parks and walk into dangerous, restricted areas like Yellowstone's Grand Prismatic Spring should face lifetime bans, heavy fines, or even jail time to protect both lives and fragile ecosystems? Don't forget to comment it. Thanks.